The fires had burned low by the time the last of the pack stumbled home, laughing and full of wine, leaving behind the scent of roasted meat and crushed flowers. Tomorrow, Alira Sinclair would become the Luna of Veyrath Hollow. Tonight she danced one final time with Merrin, the king's younger sister, spinning under the string lights until both women were breathless and smiling. "You look happy," Merrin said, catching her hands. "Really happy. Not just wedding happy, the real kind." Alira squeezed her fingers. "I am." It was not a lie. That was the strange, aching part of it. Somewhere in the months since she had arrived at Veyrath Hollow, with nothing but a healer's bag and a secret sewn into the lining of her coat, happiness had crept in without asking permission. She had not expected to feel anything for Ronan Veyrath, certainly not this. When she had first been brought before him, he had barely looked up from the reports on his desk. "The healer," he'd said, as if she were a tool being delivered rather than a person. He was hard in the way mountains are hard, unmoving, imposing, carved from something older than kindness. His pack feared him. His enemies feared him more. She had come to fear something else entirely, how much she had started to want him to look at her the way he did now. Later that night, after the celebration had emptied into silence, Ronan found her on the balcony outside their shared chambers, wrapped in a shawl against the cold mountain air. "You should be resting," he said, coming to stand beside her. "Tomorrow is a long day." "I know." She looked out at the dark shapes of the pine forest below, the ridge beyond it, disappearing into cloud. "Ronan, if something ever happened to me, if I ever had to leave, would you believe I loved you, even if it looked like I didn't?" He turned to her, brow furrowing. In 3 years as Alpha King, no one had ever asked him a question that struck so hard and so strange at once. "Why would you ask me that tonight, of all nights?" "Because I need to know the answer before tomorrow," she said softly. "That's all." He studied her for a long moment, then reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his hand lingering against her cheek. "I would believe it," he said, "because I feel the same way about you. Nothing could convince me otherwise, not even you leaving." She smiled, though her eyes were bright with something he mistook for wedding nerves. "Hold on to that," she whispered. "Promise me you'll hold on to that." He promised, not understanding why the words felt so much like a goodbye. When Ronan woke before dawn, the other side of the bed was cold. He assumed at first that she had risen early, nervous about the ceremony, perhaps walking the gardens to settle her thoughts. But when the sun climbed higher and she did not return, unease crawled up his spine. Her healer's bag was gone. Her boots were gone. Every trace of her scent inside the room had faded, as though she had never been there at all, which was impossible, because a mate's scent did not simply vanish, not for an Alpha King bonded as deeply as he was. On the pillow beside him lay a folded letter, sealed with a small pressed flower. His hands shook as he opened it. "Ronan, by the time you read this, I will already be far from Veyrath Hollow, and I am asking you, with everything left of my courage, to hear me before you hate me. My name is Alira Sinclair, and that much was never a lie. But my full history was, I am the last living daughter of the Ashwood Coven, the witches your father's father hunted down and destroyed a generation ago, when they refused to bow to the pacts that wanted their power for war. I was raised on stories of what was taken from us. I was raised, Ronan, to finish what the old wars started. I did not come to Veyrath Hollow by chance. I came because the elders who raised me believed that if a healer could get close enough to an Alpha King, close enough to be trusted with his life, she could also end it. I let myself be brought before you, because it was the only way inside these walls. I healed Merrin, because it was the fastest path to your trust. Every kindness I offered your pack in those early days was calculated. I will not pretend otherwise. You deserve the truth, even now. What I did not calculate was you. I did not plan for the nights you sat with me late into the evening, asking about herbs and remedies, not because you needed to know, but because you wanted an excuse to stay near me. I did not plan for the morning you carried an injured pup 3 miles through the snow, because you refused to let anyone else touch him until I could look at his leg, and how you held my hand the entire time I worked, as if my steadiness mattered to you as much as the pup's recovery. I did not plan to watch you kneel in front of your own council, and take responsibility for a decision that was not your fault, simply because it was right. I did not plan to fall in love with the very man I was sent to destroy. I have spent the last month unable to finish what I came here to do, and unable to tell you why, because telling you would mean losing you the moment the truth left my mouth. I chose to run instead of choosing between your life and my own truth. I am not proud of that choice. But I could not stand in front of you at our ceremony and let you bind yourself to someone who came into your home carrying a blade meant for your heart, even if that blade has long since fallen from my hand. There is still a part of my bloodline that believes the debt between our packs is not settled. I do not know if they will come for you themselves now that I have failed. I am leaving to protect you from what I could not finish, and to protect you from what may come looking for the daughter who refused her purpose. If you can ever forgive me, you will find me at the Ridge, where the old coven still shelters what remains of my family. If you cannot, then let this letter be the last thing between us, and know that everything good you ever felt from me was real, even if everything else about how I arrived in your life was not. I loved you. I still do. That was never the lie. Illyra. Ronan read the letter twice, before the shock gave way to something closer to fury, and then to something even harder to name, grief, wearing the shape of rage. He gathered his most trusted warriors within the hour. Word spread through the pack like wildfire. The king's bride was gone, and with her, a truth that shook the foundation of everything Veyrath Hollow believed about itself. Some of the older wolves, the ones who remembered the Coven Wars from their own parents' stories, muttered that the packs had never truly settled their debt to the Ashwood witches. Others simply feared what an enemy inside the king's own bed might have meant, had she chosen differently. Meryn found her brother in the stables, saddling his horse alone, his jaw tight enough to crack stone. "You're going after her," Meryn said. It was not a question. "She lied to me," Ronan said, "about everything." "Did she?" Meryn stepped closer, unafraid of the storm rolling off him. "She saved my life, Ronan, when 3 healers before her said there was nothing to be done. She sat with you every night for months when she could have slipped a blade between your ribs and ended this 100 times over. If she truly wanted you dead, you would already be dead. She left instead. That isn't the choice of someone who lied about loving you. That's the choice of someone who loved you too much to become what she was raised to be." Ronan said nothing, but his hands stilled on the saddle strap. "Go after her," Meryn said quietly, not as the Alpha King hunting a threat. "Go as the man who promised her, last night, that nothing could convince him she didn't love him. Don't let this be the thing that proves you a liar too." The Ridge Forest was 3 days' hard ride from Veyrath Hollow, deep enough into the mountains that even wolves rarely ventured there. Ronan traveled alone, refusing an escort, driven by something too raw to explain to anyone else. He followed the last trace of her scent through pine and stone, until it led him to a cluster of stone cottages tucked into the hillside, half hidden by old magic that made the eye slide past unless you already knew what you were looking for. He found Illyra kneeling beside an old woman's bed, inside the largest cottage, her hands glowing faintly with healing energy, her face pale with exhaustion. The old woman, her grandmother, he would later learn, was dying, her body too frail for even Illyra's gift to mend. Illyra looked up and went still at the sight of him filling the doorway. "You came," she whispered. "You left a letter that told me not to," Ronan said, "and then told me exactly where to find you. Which was it, Illyra? Did you want me to stay away, or did you want me to come?" Tears slipped down her face before she could stop them. "I wanted you to be safe. I wanted you to hate me enough to stay away, and love me enough to come anyway. I didn't know how to want 2 things that couldn't both be true." The old woman's frail hand found Illyra's wrist. "Is this him?" she rasped. "The king." "Yes, grandmother." The old woman studied Ronan with eyes clouded by age but sharp with old knowledge. "Our coven has waited a generation for the chance to finish what was started. My granddaughter was meant to be the ending of your line. Instead, she has spent months learning that you are not the monster your father's father was. Tell me, King, what do you intend to do with that truth?" Ronan crossed the room and knelt beside the bed, so that he was level with both women. "I intend to end a war that neither Illyra nor I chose to inherit," he said. "My father's father made a choice that cost your people everything. I will not pretend that debt disappears because I love your granddaughter, but I will not let old blood dictate what happens between us now. If there is a price to be paid for peace between our families, I will pay it honestly, in the open, before my own counsel and yours, not in secrets, not in letters written in the dark before dawn." The old woman's eyes glistened. She looked between Ronan and Alira for a long moment, then let out a slow breath. "Then perhaps," she said, "the ending my granddaughter refused to give you was never meant to be an ending at all." She passed peacefully 3 nights later, with Alira's hand in hers, and Ronan standing quietly at the door, giving them their final moments alone. They returned to Veyrath Hollow together, and Ronan did what no Alpha King before him had done. He called his full council and told them everything: Alira's bloodline, the Coven's history, the letter, the truth she had carried alone for months rather than let it destroy him. He watched the shock ripple through the room, watched old wolves who remembered the Coven wars shift uneasily in their seats. "She could have killed me," Ronan said, his voice carrying through the hall. "She had 100 chances, and took none of them. Instead, she chose to leave rather than hurt me, and she chose to come back rather than let old hatred win. If that is not proof enough of where her loyalty lies, then no proof exists that would satisfy this council." No one challenged him. Not truly. Not after the old wolves remembered, one by one, every kindness Alira had shown the pack since the day she arrived. Marin's recovery, the pup's mended leg, the long nights she had spent with no reward, except the trust of people who had never fully trusted an outsider before. The bonding ceremony that had been interrupted by dawn was held again beneath a clear sky, smaller this time, quieter, but far more honest than the first had ever been. Alira stood before Ronan not as a healer with a hidden past, but as herself, fully known and fully chosen. "I told you once that I needed to know you'd believe I loved you, even if it looked like I didn't," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Thank you for believing it enough to come find me." "I promised you I would," Ronan said, taking her hands in his. "I intend to keep every promise I make you, for the rest of both our lives." Back in his study that evening, Ronan framed the letter that had once broken his heart, and hung it on the wall above his desk, where he could see it every day, not as a wound, but as a reminder of the courage it had taken her to write the truth at all, and the courage it had taken both of them to turn an ending into a beginning. Veyrath Hollow settled into a peace it had not known in generations, built not on old debts finally paid, but on a truth spoken freely, and a love that had chosen to stay.